I'm David Gadarian, and this is the flip story. From the NFL to late 40s battling fibromyalgia and degenerative arthritis, being told he needs 4 joint replacements just to function, to becoming a world-ranked sprinter. We're going to explore how today's guest, Daniel Esposito, flipped his body and then his soul. Dan, that journey from broken to world-class at 50 is just, it's incredible.
Thank you.
Yeah, welcome to the show.
I appreciate it. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. I'm excited to kind of get into it with you. So I think the place we'd like to start, we'll kind of work through your journey and kind of go in a little bit of a sequence. But let's start with right now. What are you up to? Just to kind of level set, give the audience some kind of baseline to build back from.
Yeah. So right now, last week, last Thursday, I placed third in my age group in the men's 100 meters at Penn relays.
Nice.
Haven't trained in a year and a half. It's an interesting thing, the way that, when you're breaking down chronic pain, even a little bit that's left, like let's say you get rid of 99% of it, that 1% still hurts and still affects you. But I pulled my hamstrings last year at the indoor world championship and haven't trained at all since then, maybe jogged a quarter mile in that time, and was fortunate enough to have a decent showing at Penn relays. I didn't feel fast, but it's my best placement at Penn relays, so I'm happy with the result. But I'm at a point now where in June I've got the Mid-Atlantic Championships, Masters, USATF Championships, and then I believe it's July will be the National Championships in Ohio. So I'm at the point where I think I'm pretty good with training fairly consistently.
Nice. Well,
Yeah,
that's pretty amazing.
I got to get these wheels turning faster. So.
All right. So world-class runner.
Yeah.
Do you mind if I ask what's the age group here?
Yeah, so I'm going to be 54 in May. So I compete in the 50 to 54 category now. They do it in 5-year increments, just like, you'd be basically competing against who you would have competed against in college.
Right.
So the masters, just have those categories. So, yeah.
All right. So let's kind of start at the beginning here, because a little bit of backstory. Where did you grow up?
So I was born in Philadelphia.
Okay.
Parents got divorced super, super early. I was probably 4 or so when my parents got divorced. And then I mainly grew up down in the Orlando area. So I've been back in Philadelphia pretty much since my senior year. Couple stops back up to Philadelphia to live with my dad for a year or so in between there. But the majority of my youth was Altamont Springs, Florida.
Okay.
Yeah.
High school athletics, big part of your life?
Yeah, it's interesting. So it's kind of a funny part of the story. When I was a freshman, I was actually in Philadelphia, and I was a catcher my whole life. I was a baseball player more than a football player.
Yeah.
And I was the second string JV catcher as a freshman. The guy that was a sophomore was going to bump up the next year and be the starting varsity catcher, and I was going to be the starting JV catcher. But I decided my sophomore year to move back down to Florida, and I went out for the baseball team there, and the starting catcher was also my age. His name was Jerry Thurston. He was the highest ranked catching prospect in the history of high school baseball by the time he graduated.
Okay.
The backup to him was, you'll know this name, Jason Varitek.
Oh boy, yeah.
And Varitek
Red
rarely,
Sox fame, yeah.
yeah, he rarely got behind the plate because Thurston was so good. I think he bumped up to the pros a couple times, but obviously didn't have the success that Varitek had.
Oh, that's unbelievable. That's what you're walking into, huh?
That's what I was walking into. And it actually made me kind of give up on baseball because I only wanted to be a catcher. I didn't realize, as a young kid, you don't know just what your potential is, how athletic you are. Should have stuck with it, I think. But I think my path, sort of God had destined for me, was to get that little NFL thing next to my name so I could, go through this chronic pain journey, reverse it, and then kind of give me a little bit of credence on my resume to make people say, hey, let me have this guy on my podcast. But my senior year, moved back to Philadelphia, and that's the first year I decided to start football.
Okay.
And they put me at fullback, although I wanted to be a tailback. My father was a tailback at the same high
Right.
school. I was, the fastest kid in the school,
Right. You had to
weighing
catch
in
your
about.
body though. You're probably crushing kids.
Yeah, it took me about 3 games to actually understand the game, but then when I finally did, I'd only get the ball 6 to 8 times max per game. I think I
Right.
had a 8 or 10-yard average per carry. Had to walk on to a Division II college to continue playing football, and thankfully, I had a pretty rough childhood. I think a lot of us kids from the '70s and '80s did, the Vietnam War and the whole, just social movements that were happening. I think it didn't kind of lend itself to the best family structures and environments.
Fair.
And I feel like it's even degrading more and more now. But yeah, I had, two fairly alcoholic, abusive stepfathers that made my youth very challenging. And it's kind of, and I like to talk about that because a lot of people who are in chronic pain think that pain is, pain from your childhood moves on into adulthood. And that's just no scientific evidence in that. It's usually habits that you learn from your parents, diets. There can be some slight genetic um, polymorphisms that slow down some of the sort of biological mechanisms that can manage some of the junk that happens to your body that's causing the chronic pain. But yeah, you don't carry chronic pain through. Once you have pain, you have pain. I mean, pain only comes from one place, and that's these nerve endings called nociceptors, right? And other than that, there's no other place that pain can actually come from. So those nociceptors, pain receptors, have to be aggravated in order to feel that, have that signal sent to your brain so you're actually feeling chronic pain. And the reason for that is usually the tissue around it, the fascia around it becomes compromised, becomes hardened, filled up with inflammation, fibrins, poor collagen synthesis, oxidative stress, glycation, the main thing, calcification, main things that are causing pain. And that's really coming from our diet for the most part.
I want to come back to this. I do want to come back to this. I want to spend actually a lot of time here because I'm really curious how you know all this.
Yeah.
Um, okay, so you're D2 walk on. You're obviously training like a madman at this point.
Oh,
You
yeah.
are at this point. Do you have a goal in your mind that like NFL, or is it like seem really far away and you're just on a
No,
vision quest of you're just gonna push your
no,
body?
it was right there for me. I mean, I knew that at that point, I knew my athletic ability was so much better
Yeah,
than most of the people that I was playing with. Not to say that I didn't have really good athletes that I competed against, but
right.
I was running a 4.27 40. I was 215 pounds. I could bench press 220 20 times. I was an all natural athlete, very flexible.
Yeah,
Flexibility has actually been one of the major things that I focused on my entire childhood through even now. I think it's the key to longevity. But there's an interesting story. So my senior year, I lived in Northeast Philadelphia. I went to a school in Northeast Philadelphia, and down the street, there's a really rinky-dink gym. And the owner of that gym just happened to be the strength and conditioning coordinator for the Jets. His name was Greg McCready's, and he came up to me one day and he's like, "Hey, there's a guy here who's in the NFL. He's a quarterback and he needs someone to throw with. Just do you have some time to throw with him?" I was like, "Yeah, let me check my schedule." Of course I do,
right.
right? So, and but even earlier than that, I remember like fourth or fifth grade, I was walking out of my home. My stepfather at the time was watching a Detroit Lions game, and I saw a running back do something, and I was like, nah, I can do that. I just knew that it was part of my future. Um, and anyway, so after I was working out with this professional quarterback, about 4 or 5 times at the end of our sessions, he goes, "Hey, man, you're really good. You can make it in the NFL." So that
Huh.
cemented my belief system, right? I
Yeah.
was like, okay, if this guy sees these guys and I'm this 18-year-old kid who's, catching everything this guy throws to me, I'm running with him. And then it just so happens that my first NFL game was against that guy. It was Rich Gannon. He's a quarterback
Yeah.
At the time for the Raiders, I believe, and then when I played against him, he was with the Chiefs.
Huh, that's amazing.
Yeah,
He had a pretty big coaching career too, if I recall, right? Am I
I mean, he's just a stud. That
Yeah,
guy is an athlete. He actually, I think, started out as a running back. He was a running back at Delaware. Like, I think they ran like a wing tee or a wishbone, and then they moved him to quarterback. And it
right.
makes sense because I couldn't beat him
Versatility.
in a
Right, right,
race.
right.
Yeah, it
Huh,
was crazy. I was like, I beat everybody in races. How come I can't beat this old guy? So,
right. Oh, that's
yeah,
awesome. So you
yeah.
have this kind of vision in your head. Uh, I know you're talking about natural ability, but I assume you're training like a madman. You're probably dieting, doing all the things you need to do to kind of compete at an elite level.
So, it's a funny thing about diet. My stepmom has her doctorate in nutrition. And when you look at sort of the protocols and sort of, what they say you should be eating, it's like a lot of vegetables. And it was, that theory that vegetables were super healthy for you, which they're not that healthy for you. There's not a lot of nutrition. But my father owned water ice and ice cream stores. So I kind of ate whatever I want, but the training part, like I was a madman about training. I used to watch this VHS tape, the world's greatest or NFL's greatest running backs. And I'm not Herschel Walker, Walter Payton
Yeah.
used to run these hills all the time. And I was like, well, if that's the greatest running back that's ever lived in my mind at that time.
Yep.
And I said, well, if he's doing that, that's what I need to do. So there at my school, the stadium was down in a bowl. So there was a nice hill right there that I could just sprint up. And I was, most kids were down the shore all summer. I was working at my dad's water race store and running hills and doing plyometrics. And, I had a spark inside of me that I think wasn't just driven by my motivation, but I've got this gene polymorphism called MTHFR. It's fairly common, but it's associated with the most Olympic sort of power athletes. And what it
Huh.
is it's your body's inability to manage folate correctly and turn it into this enzyme that manages histamine. And histamine is that fight or flight response, right?
Yep.
So I always had this little bit of a fuse that was always sort of set inside of me internally because of that sort of extra histamine that was running through my body. So it was hard to keep me down. I was out at night, midnight. I'd go for runs. I just, love to just work off I guess it was stress at the time. To me, it was just like, I got to go run. I got to go do something. So, yeah.
All right. So you play, you're in the NFL, you obviously well, you can kinda share what happens next.
Yeah. So let's go back to college. So in college, my first 3 years, my first year, I was a red shirt, right? Just trying to learn the game even more. I mean, the first day of practice was an eye opener. It was completely different than the
Right,
Philadelphia Public
level
League,
of
even though
discipline, yeah, of
it was
course.
Division II football. A lot of these kids were coal cracker region kids from, that were just hard nosed, Pittsburgh, Scranton, and some Philadelphia guys that played on the team, and they were serious about football. And I didn't really, the game didn't slow down for me until the end of my sophomore year, which was really my third year because I was redshirted.
Right,
And that spring game, like I dominated. I was the best running back. And then going into the summer, I was like, this position is mine for the taking. I barely got the ball my first couple years, and so going into that summer, I basically won the starting job my junior year. But the night before the game, the head coach said to the rest of the coaches, Esposito's a walk on. The other two guys are scholarship athletes. They're going to be the 1-2 running back. So I got demoted without any more practices from the starting running back to third string. And so I saw that written up on the board and I was like, that's interesting, but I'm still going to get my carries. First game comes around, I got no carries. I was like, And the running backs did not do well.
right.
And the running backs were actually even yelled at by the offensive coordinator. And, I'm just steaming in the back of the room, like, you didn't even give me the ball once. Then the second game comes around, same thing happens. I was like, okay. So I went to my position coach after a practice. He was a younger guy, so it was easy to talk to him. I was like, Hoagie, why am I not playing? He's like, Espo, just hang in there. You're going to get your time. I was like, no, 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 no. I need to know why I'm not playing. If you don't tell me, I'm just quitting football. I won't come back. So he told me, and told me the story that I just told you about the scholarships. And I was like, all right, well, I got a bigger hill to climb now. And, man of my word, and it said I was going to stay. So I was like, I got to find my role and I got to fill it. So, I would get the ball once a game and I'd go 60 yards for a touchdown or 40 yards for a touchdown. And I wouldn't see the ball again the entire game. And it was so frustrating. Not only for me, my dad would travel to
Right.
every single game, and, there's an incentive every touchdown. He'd give me $10. I was like, I'm not making any money here. And, so then my senior year comes around. Once again, it's kind of obvious I'm the best running back. I have the most yards per carry. I have the most yards after contact. I can catch better than any running back on the field. I'm very good at blocking. First game comes around my senior year, and I'm thinking I'm a senior now. The other scholarship kid is just a redshirt junior now or a redshirt sophomore. So I should, as a senior, first game I get no carries. I was like, man, this is terrible. So second game comes and I'm getting no carries, but the other running backs still aren't doing very well.
Right, they're not producing.
So they finally put me in at the end of the first half, and I rip off a couple nice runs. I end up that game with 163 yards or so, mainly in the second half. And then the third game I finally started, I was offensive player of the nation for Division II. And then just, I had over 1,000 yards that year. The scouts were coming out, working me out. It came down to Miami and Washington. I wasn't drafted, but they were calling me as a priority free agent signing. Ended up going to Washington. I should have went to Miami, but my agent gave them the wrong phone number, so we didn't even know they were calling until I decided to sign up with Washington. That's what you get as a Division II football player. So,
right.
And
what year was this?
That was 95.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. Is the 94 season going into the 95 season. So my last semester of college was amazing. I ran track and I took theater and drawing one were my only two classes I needed to graduate. So it was a really good year because I knew that the Redskins had already signed me. So I'm like, I'm going to the NFL.
Right.
I got to take these two easy classes. I, went and worked for the facilities crew and rode around on their van, just going through campus, just looking at girls. So it was a good semester.
I love it.
And then so I make it to the NFL. They brought me in. I ended up breaking my jaw in my first game though. First play ever. I broke it in two places, running down on kickoff. All the teeth on my left-hand side bottom were all pointed over here. And then this one was like twisted. And so ended up getting an injury settlement actually that year. And then the next year, it's kind of a funny story as well. I was in a pizza place with my girlfriend at the time, and there's one of those coin machines that had football helmets in it. And I said, the team that comes out of here is the team I'm going to play for. The Saints fall out. A week later, my agent calls me and says, hey, the Saints want to work you out. And I was like, wow. I was like, me and her looked at each other like, what in the heck?
Right.
And I feel like it's just part of the path that God, put me on. I mean, it's the Saints, and at the time, it's kind of interesting. I was very much atheist, agnostic, didn't have much faith. And a lot of that stemmed from my childhood and sort of the abuse that, was dealt to me and my brother and my mother from our stepfathers. And, it's funny, there's two passages in the Old Testament that made me say, like, there's definitely not a God. Don't eat swine for it's unclean and don't mix linen and wool. Well, it turns out both of those things cause two of the pain makers or the offenders that I've identified that is causing the most chronic pain. Because when you mix linen and wool, the frequency of the fabric dies, and therefore it's pulling electrons out of your body, causing oxidative stress internally. So all these polyester clothes that we're wearing today is causing this constant slow leak of electrons, which causes your body to need more ATP. to create more electrons, but it's also causing this process called glycation. And then when you eat swine or pig,
Just real quick, what's
yeah,
glycation?
yeah. So glycation is when a sugar molecule interacts with a fat or a protein, and it's like barbecue, right? You know, when you barbecue something, you get that film of sticky, it's
Yeah.
protein. That's happening internally in your body when you eat certain foods or you're wearing these fabrics. Um, so the fabrics cause both glycation and oxidative stress, and then swine causes glycation. Like your body can handle, say, 15,000 of these events per day. If you eat one strip of bacon, it's 30,000 of those events. And then that glycation is going to cause oxidative stress as well as inflammation, right? And then every time you create inflammation, your body is creating a collagen response. And most people aren't building their collagen correctly, right? They're missing a lot of the components that give the amino acids the instructions to build it correctly. So instead of it becoming like this rubbery, slimy, structured protein, it becomes glue or very similar to glue. And then it starts binding all your muscle fibers together. And every muscle fiber is covered in collagen anyway with these things called mesomes. And those mesomes have to be not only built correctly with the right collagen so they slide across one another and give you flexibility, they also have to be built correctly or they stick together. And then that's when you start losing movement, start losing the ability for blood to kind of get into your muscles and deliver oxygen and electrical charges.
Okay. I uh I think this is all fascinating. I could tell you I won't wear polyester shirts. I find and maybe it's what you just identified. I find that they one make me sweat a lot, and two, they actually make me my stress level goes up.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's causing events to happen in your
Yep.
body, your energy field, which is really interesting because my main business is an energy brokerage. And, you know, it's so weird that everything within this sort of method and just life in general points to energy, right? Everything's an energy exchange. Like the catalyst that's in the supplement I created, you know, people think, oh, it's dissolving something. It's actually adding electrons to the protein, breaking it apart or weakening the chemical bond. Because until that chemical bond is broken, so you think of glue, how glue comes together and gets sticky. That's because
Yep.
the chemical bonds are coming together. So think super glue, right? And so now these things are getting together and you can't break through it unless there's a catalyst that weakens the chemical bond. And then once that bond is weakened, the body actually have mechanisms that can start breaking the rest of the junk down slowly, right? And then it goes out through your interstitium and then through your lymphatic system as waste.
All right. I want to tie a few things together
Yeah.
and talk through. So you leave the NFL. You you uh, you have a period. It sounds like between the NFL and around 40, where you get this kind of your body starting to just really misbehave. Right? Fair to
Yeah.
say.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so that's happening, and we'll talk about that. My question is, you you seem to have a really good command of this whole space, and you almost sound like you're a little bit of a biohacker. It's kind of fascinating. Was
Yeah.
this behavior and this energy, was this something that you were developing in the NFL, or was this kind of this curiosity around this, or was this at this moment of kind of body chaos where you started to go deep in this space?
Yeah, I didn't really mess with supplements during my younger sports years.
Yeah.
Didn't really mess with supplements at all until much later. After reading Bill Romanowski's book, and he was a big supplement guy. I think he was
Yeah.
also a steroid guy, but anyway, he wrote a
DC
book about
guy.
supplements.
Yeah.
Yeah, you know, I started kind of getting a little bit of an idea that oh, these things, you know, there might be something to it because this guy's taken it. But really, what happened was so the major kind of, you know, all along I was starting to get stiff, right? And I
Yeah.
just most people just say, oh, that's old age. It's not really old age. It's disease within the body, right? It's just these things that are happening. And but once my first son was born, and he's going to turn 15 in July, that's really when it started like happening in mass. I used to work for Washington Mutual as a wholesaler. I was making a ton of money, doing really well. The mortgage crisis happened. My income went from anywhere between 250 to 500 a year to zero.
Right. So
And
that's like '08.
and then I had a son coming with someone that I wasn't, planning on having a son with. And and then at the same time, I started my commercial energy brokerage. That is really when the majority of it started. Because what I was doing is, because obviously I'm very like intense about being successful in some ways. So what I would do is I would just like, all right, I'm going to order 2 pizzas a day from Domino's 3 days a week and just sit at home and build this business and learn it. So I had no experience in energy before, and I started my own business in the energy business. And so I had to figure it out quickly to start making money because I had a
Right.
kid coming. So
So
I
this is
could,
around what, '09,
gosh,
right? Because
he
mortgage
was
crisis was '08, give
he
or
was born in
take.
2011.
All
I
right.
had worked a little bit in
Yep, yeah,
some
yep.
other like FHA mortgage shops, for a
Right.
little bit, and then it was probably a year or two after the mortgage crisis happened, and so that pizza was causing a lot of inflammation, right? Gluten causes inflammation, the folic
Okay,
acid
right.
causes inflation, and I could
And your body's
feel.
pretty tuned up, right? Is that fair to
Yeah, I mean,
say?
I
So you probably feel food more than maybe, than I might feel food just because your mind is more focused on how your body's working.
yeah, yeah, I'm very connected to how food makes me feel, which is great because it's caused me to really recognize the things that were hurting me. But
Mhm.
when I put the science behind it, it was just like, okay, I know that I have to get rid of these foods. But anytime, so inflammation is a cycle. It's a healing cycle, right? It's not your body attacking itself. That's actually a very rare condition called autoimmune. But we've given this blanket coverage. Like when people say you're going to copy something, you're going to Xerox something. You're not Xerox, you're going to go copy it. It's like autoimmune. You have to find a T cell in healthy tissue through a biopsy to get a real autoimmune diagnosis. Those T cells happen after the inflammation process is initiated. So once it's initiated, it goes through a bunch of stages. One of those stages is when the white blood cells eat basically the invader and give off lymph. So what started happening is my body just became overwhelmed with lymph. My lymphatic system wasn't draining properly. And it made life super difficult. I was gaining weight. My face looked like a pumpkin. I'm losing hair. I was sweating all the time. I couldn't focus at all. And then so I decided, so this was the start of, I'm going to start looking how to get healthy. And of course, I went to the most reasonable place anybody would, and that was Netflix. And saw some documentaries there that I thought were, oh, they're talking about these superfoods and juicing and things like that. And I'm like, well, I'm going to start doing that. And that actually put me in a much worse place because some of the things that I was juicing were beets and spinach
Yeah.
and Swiss chard. Now, in those plants, there are plant defense chemicals called oxalic acid, which if it goes through your kidney and starts attracting calcium, it becomes a kidney stone. But when you juice these plants or do beetroot powder or beet juice, that oxalic acid is a nanoparticle. So it leaks out through your gut lining and then starts depositing basically kidney stones all throughout your body. And that's when things got really, really bad, like where it just felt like I had razor blades inside my body all the time. And it creates a bunch of, or slows down a bunch of processes in the body that lead to even more damage other than just the physical damage that it's creating. So I got all that going on, and just, I mean, it was a really terrible way to live, to be in
Yeah.
that chronic pain, especially if you've got a young child. I'm not showing up the right way because now my anxiety is through the roof. And then, I with my partner now, we have an 8-year-old. He just went to baseball. And right before he was born, 3 months before he was born, I was 265 pounds. If I was to turn my neck, to kind of look over there, everything
Right.
my whole body would have to turn. I couldn't lift my arm out to grab my McDonald's out the window or pay a toll. Like nothing was moving. And 3 months before he was born, I was like, I got to fix this. I'd been prescribed 4 joint replacements to start at 50. I had fibromyalgia, degenerative arthritis, restless leg, all sorts of diagnoses that I got, but no answers, right? Even the
Okay.
surgeons and, the doctors and stuff. And so it was at that time where I said out loud to the universe, I'm going to fix this. And for the
So just
first,
just real quick, right there.
yeah.
You're gonna fix this. Is this a moment of despair, or is this hope, or is this energy? Is this eureka? What's happening in that exact moment? Because it seems like you're at kind of a real valley moment right there, and
Yeah.
what's happening? Just for, if you don't mind sharing where your headspace was right there.
So my partner is much younger than me, and I'm 54 soon. I have an 8-year-old, and I was not the best father or example to my older kid. And I was like, she's going to leave me and I'm not going to be a good dad. And that's all I really cared about, was being a good dad and a good family man. So when I found out my first son was going to be born, even though I didn't plan it, I was like, okay, well now my set is shifting. I have to be a great dad. Right. And
Right.
that was just it. It's like whatever I'm going into, I'm just going to try to excel at it. And so, a lot of times I miss the mark, but at least my mind is there. And, my mind was like, well, if this body, and I was sort of leaning into God a little bit, like thinking like if this body was designed, it was designed to heal. I just have to find the right healing environment. Right. And I had no idea what that was. I got a C- in college biology. Right. I was in 3 high schools, right? 5 elementary schools, my education, the foundation was very poor.
Right.
But I did well on my SATs, and I scored genius level as a youngster, on certain tests that they would give you back in the day. So I had the capacity to learn this stuff, which I think pretty much almost anybody does.
Right.
But I was just going to do it. I just knew that there was a way, and I was going to figure it out. And for the next year, I thought, I'm just going to stretch it away. I'm just going to rip these muscles longer. Right. I thought that was the way to do it, but I would pull things apart. You'd hear things click. I'd have a little bit of relief. And then the next day I'd be right back into the spot where I was. And that went on for about a year.
Okay.
And there's a bunch of reasons for that we could get into if you want, or I could just kind of go into the story. But I think it's important to know that the bonds that hold collagen together are 7 times stronger than steel. So you're not going to rip that apart. You're not going to stretch that away. The fibrins, which is one, there's 5 major pain makers. So I know it sounds like a lot, but there's 5. So the fibrins, which is left behind as part of the inflammation cycle, that acts like a bungee cord. It's almost like those, finger locks that you put in, but it kind of, you can stretch it and it comes out to 3 times its length,
Yep.
doesn't break, and then it pulls itself back. It's like a bungee cord, right? So, and it's also like a polymer. So it's like a plastic water bottle. So you hear that sound of the cracking, but it's really just like, like those plastic things, you pull it apart,
Yep.
it goes back, and that's all that's happening. And so I just was like, God, man, nothing's working. Like, well, stretching wasn't working. And then, I fell forward a couple of times into things. The universe just sort of placed some of these answers on my lap, gave me the right questions to ask, created the right environment around me to ask certain questions.
And you're rolling with your energy business during this, or this comes later?
No, no, this is kind of part of the catalyst of what made it
Right. So
really
you're
go
in an
from
environment
just,
that's already, in order to know your business, you got to be curious about it. And then you have, it sounds like a true test case right in front of you when you look in the mirror of,
yeah, yeah.
here's,
And then when the first thing gives way, you're like, okay, one thing happened. I need to repeat that. I thought like a few thousand times, but the reality of it is when your body gets into that shape or that state, like everything is bound together. Like literally, I would have to say that every single muscle in my body was affected in some way.
Right. And mental state at this moment, you're coming from peak physical NFL player. You
Yeah,
obviously just, that's pretty elite. There's not a lot of people in the universe that can make that claim, and nobody gets into the NFL just by accident. It's a lot
right.
of hard work, a lot of training, a lot of skill, a lot of physical talent as well, obviously.
Yeah,
Your body needs to really be kind of peak elite.
yeah,
And now you're in this other spot. And what
yeah,
what's the headspace look like here? Because I know a lot of folks are in this space. They don't necessarily have as high a high as you did from a physical sense, but they certainly share the low.
yeah,
Um, and we're going
yeah.
to talk about kind of what comes after that shortly. So what's happening here?
Yeah, I mean, the anxiety was out of control. I
Yeah.
never had anxiety my whole life other than, like, I could count on my hands the 5 or 6 times that I felt anxious, and it was usually right before the snap of the first play, and when I
Right.
used to try to get into a bar with a fake ID with my cousin back in the day. So, that's where it
Right.
was only one bar that made me feel that way, so I just didn't have anxiety, and now just, like, my whole life is I have anxiety, and I'm like, "Where is this coming from?" It's so foreign to me. And then the depression started happening a few years later. Anxiety and depression are closely linked with one another because the two molecules that kind of create that. Um, Ego was shattered. I mean, played football at 215. I was a fairly good looking guy. I'd get a lot of second looks. I'm
Right.
not getting any second looks anymore, and I can't move. My other superpower after football was, I'd be out in the nightclubs and I'd be dancing and I could move pretty smoothly and girls would just come up to me and
Right.
that just all went away. So, but at the point, now I was with like the partner that I, wanted to be with for the rest of my life. And that stuff didn't matter to me, but I wanted to be able to show up for them, but I just wasn't, and I couldn't, no matter
Right.
how much you wanted to. Anxiety is fight or flight, which is a pure survival mechanism. So you're in pure survival mode. So any stressor that hits you is exaggerated, and instead of responding to it, you're reacting to it. And I can be pretty mean sometimes, unfortunately, when I'm in that state.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. So now why didn't you get the joint replacements?
So I went to it was the some institute here in Philadelphia that had an art show on the human body, and I saw the joint replacement cadaver that they had there, and it was a rod jammed into their femur, and I was
Mm.
like, I'm not doing that, and
Right.
I don't know what year it was. I should look at my paperwork, but I think I was probably about 43 or 40, in that range when they said at 50 is when you need to start the joint replacement. So I hadn't yet hit
Okay.
50. But the interesting thing is at 50 is when I won my 2 gold medals at the national championship in Kentucky. It was my first national championship. They were in relay events. They weren't individual medals, but I'm still going to brag on it.
Yeah, why
Eventually
not?
I'm going to get my individual medal. But, and listen, after that weekend, because there were so many races I had to run in, I was really sore. Just because I could move at that point didn't mean that the pain wasn't going to come afterwards. And so that had been my challenge over the past, however many years it's been now, 5, 6 years of trying to run track, but not be able to train consistently. Because if you do train, even though you can now move, all that junk in your body is going to aggravate those pain receptors and cause that pain and then kind of stiffen you up a little bit more. But, and that would last like 2 weeks, and then depression would come, and it would it'd be a tough place to be. But I'm finally at a place where after running at Penn relays, I felt great. The next day I was sore in the morning. I wasn't sore after that at all. So
Yeah.
I'm at a place where like I know I can train consistently, get the muscles going back in my legs and start, churning these legs a little bit faster.
Okay. So now you're at this point, your diet. part of this, or you went from like 265? You don't look like you weigh 265 right now. I don't
No,
know
I'm
what you
about
weigh, but it's not that.
yeah, I'm
Right.
about 205 now. I'm right at
Right.
6 foot.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, diet was one of the hardest things, and it's a really hard thing for a lot of people, especially when you don't have the information about how these foods are actually damaging you. But my teachers were podcasters, right? Like Dr. Mercola, Dr. Zach Bush, Sally Norton, all these sort of biohackers, medical doctors in the natural medical space. And then Paul Saladino was one as well. And Paul Saladino's initial kind of Instagram was the Carnivore MD. And these guys would all talk about studies and research and the biochemistry of the body. And I was like, all right, I have to start learning these things. It's the only way I'm going to dig myself out of this hole. So I initially, after I was juicing, I decided to go vegan. Right. I tried that piece.
Yep.
That's what caused my depression. And you can look at your DNA and your methylation cycle and find out exactly why that is. The body needs the nutrients that are almost only found in meat in order to not create depression, especially B12, which is not in the plant kingdom at all. And so I decided to do the carnivore thing for a while, and it was okay. I was just like, I don't know if this is the right diet for me. It's very hard to stick to.
Yeah.
But I didn't come up with, I mean, I came up with it, but then I later found out it's already been come up with before. But there's 90 or 91, if you include water, essentials that the body must get, right? There's 16 vitamins, 12 amino acids, 3 fats, and a bunch of minerals, right? And if you have those in your body, they create everything else that your body needs. So then I created a spreadsheet called the world's greatest shopping list. And I was like, okay, what are the most bioavailable versions of these foods? So now when I'm shopping, I'm making sure that I'm hitting as many of these essentials as possible. And when you look at this spreadsheet, you realize like how malnourished you actually are. So, even though you try to get everything from food, it's still a good thing to supplement with like a methylated multivitamin, an essential amino acid, a good fish oil, and a good trace mineral supplement. I think they're all good to have around because it's so hard to get this
Yeah.
stuff out of your diet, especially 75% of our food choices are manufactured foods. And that,
Right.
they talk about low calorie and vegan and all, but where are the nutrients? Like, where are the things
Right.
that we actually need? They're not in there. Right. So,
All right. You're in this space now. This is kind of interesting. I have a question for you. You're obviously you've studied pretty hard around all this. And you're also physically still pushing yourself. Uh, Athlete or scientist first?
athlete,
Yeah.
curious athlete. So,
Okay. Yeah.
helper. I really helper. I think that's kind of like always been my sort of how I identified myself, because, what's a man want to be is useful, right? If you're not useful, there's no place for you in the hierarchy. So you got to find your usefulness. And I think as at a very young age, kindergarten, I was just sort of tuned into other people and their needs and, always wanted to be, just an asset for people.
Right. Awesome. I did want to come back on a few things just because it's been real fun and interesting kind of talking with you. Do you you mentioned there's a few different people in your life that have kind of shown up either in person or podcasts, what have you. Your mom was in health. I think it's you had exposure there. You had, my son's got kind of a neat story. He's like pretty into weightlifting, right? And kind of the high school gym coach is I don't have it exactly right, so I'm gonna say it incorrectly, but for a minute, literally about a minute, he I think he had he was the world record holder for deadlift. And when he was doing that, there was some other guy who like literally 4 minutes later was like
Broke it.
the guy, and
Right.
he like that guy became like the guy for like 5 years or something. But
Yeah.
my son's got like this weird kind of thing. Like he's into weightlifting, and he's also got like this weightlifting, you know, expert right in his gym. So he can ask him like about all these exercises and things. And so some of it's like serendipitous proximity, some of it's uh a will. Do you think if you had different kind of people in your life that you would have discovered all this, or do you
No.
think no?
No, 100%. I mean, the first thing that happened was, I'm 265, I'm struggling. I went to a networking event and a friend of mine showed up. Now, earlier in the year, about 8 months before or so, I had played baseball in a men's baseball league. I kind of, just, still trying to push myself, even though, it was hard. And our catcher didn't show up. And I was like, hey, I used to catch, I'll catch.
Okay.
So then for the next 8 months, both my knees were the size of like two softballs. Like the
Right.
swelling would not go down. I had to get it drained out. It would come right back. And at this event, and a friend of mine says, Dan, why are you limping? And now the only thing I had started doing at this point was stretching and foam rolling. Right. And I was
Okay.
telling people how important foam rolling seemed to be because I was getting all this cracking and stuff happening. And I said, my knees have been swollen for 8 months. I can't get them to go down. It's painful. She goes, well, why don't you rub some castor oil on them? And I looked at her like she was an alien. And I was like, okay, okay, okay. And I thought she was going to try to sell me essential oils or something.
Right.
And she starts talking about it, but she's so intent on me doing this the same way that I'm trying to tell people, you got a foam roll. It's something's there. Something's great. And I'm like, you know what? I'm just going to take advice from someone for the first time in my life. And so I went, got some castor oil, did about a shot glass worth, heated it up on the stove, rubbed it on my lymph nodes, my knees, etc. Went to bed. The next morning I woke up, the swelling was completely gone. Completely gone. For the next 3 days, I was blowing junk out of my face. It could have filled a big mason jar. And then all that puffiness in my body went away. So it turns
Huh.
out that castor oil will very easly clean out your lymphatic system. And you must have a clear lymphatic system to get rid of waste and disease from your body. Right. So at that point, I went from maybe having 1 to 3 clear head days per month to now half the month was I was functional, right? That I was motivated and could get things done. I'd say about 6 months to a year later, it was that next summer when the Phillies started and all went to a game and we had a beer or two. I'm not a big drinker at all, but I felt worse. And I thought, well, maybe I'm acidic. And so I sent Kate, I said, can you go get me some of that essential water? It's, high pH. And there's some debatable science around this, but I drank it and I felt immediately better. And then that's when I was like, I need to learn about proper hydration. Because I tried to learn about 5 years ago, but the internet wasn't so prevalent. I
Right.
couldn't find a book that seemed to make any sense. But I came across the first podcast I listened to was Dr. Joe Mercola. He was labeled the first quack on Facebook, but obviously, he's on to something if you label him a quack. And he was interviewing Dr. Zach Bush. And Dr. Bush was talking about hydration at the cellular level. And then I started thinking, well, if everything's made up of cells, if I just make my cells healthy, will that then start making the rest of me healthy? So I started changing my water, felt an immediate improvement because I was just drinking the cheap acidic water in the plastic water bottles, which is actually very damaging for you on a couple different levels, to spring water. And I just felt a bunch better. But then the next sort of thing in the series of Dr. Mercola's podcast was on near range infrared light because I knew it stimulated the mitochondria of the cell, but I didn't know much else. So I decided to go start doing red light therapy at one of these locations. And I would walk in there, do my half-hour treatment, and I would walk out and I would hear this click and I'd have a little bit of relief and maybe 1 or 2 clicks. It wasn't much, but it was enough
Yeah.
for me to go buy a red light. So I went and bought myself my own near range infrared light. I actually sleep under it every single night. And at the time, I didn't know what was happening, but what it turns out is photons and heat energy help denature those chemical bonds of those proteins that are sticking all the junk together inside your body. And then it allows your body then to then get rid of it. So I did that. And then the next thing was fasting. And so the same friend that told me about the castor oil challenged me to do a 3-day fast, because there was this guy that was big on the internet back then doing this snake diet fast. And I was like, well, if he can do it, I can do it. So at about day 2, that click that I got from the red light therapy was like click, 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 click. So what happens is about 20 hours is your liver releases enzymes because they're being starved. They go look for misfolded proteins so they can use them kind of as food to keep the body alive. So they're snipping that chemical bond, breaking it, allowing that protein, that inflammation fibrin or the collagen to then kind of break apart. And then you start getting release. And so, went through that 3-day fast. And now I fast quite often, which is another Leviticus law. It's in the Bible. Fasting is something that we should be doing to keep this temple, um, you know, clear for the spirit that's inside of us. And, it's at that point is when I actually started thinking like, maybe this Bible thing, this God thing is real.
Uh-huh.
And this is all sort of part of a journey that I'm supposed to go on, not only to find it, but it's kind of like my purpose is to figure this out, not just for myself, but for other people. Um, and
Okay.
then,
Question for
yeah,
you right there, right
yeah,
there.
yeah.
You walked right into it. I was kind of curious about this kind of discovery of faith. How old were you at this point where you're kind of starting to feel this?
I mean, I would say early to mid 40s, probably mid 40s, about 44, 45. I start kind of thinking, okay, there's something here, but I was like still debated it. Um, but then a couple other things happened, right? I could kind of tell you about. So do you have more to that question though?
I was just kind of curious of how you reconcile how people find faith. I think that's kind of interesting just in general. And in your case, you're in this environment where you're having some physical challenges. You're looking for answers. Are you discovering answers? How does this come about? Because
I,
obviously it's an important part of you. We've
yeah,
talked about it a couple different times through the interview, and I'm
yeah.
just
The biggest,
curious.
the biggest, the thing that was the tipping point. So, I'm in the energy business. Shell is one of our suppliers. So we qualified for, a golf outing weekend up in the Ozarks with Shell. So one, I had to be in the energy business. I had to be good enough to be on their top broker list. Um, had to be at the place we went to. Everybody got food poisoning. And so I was like, wonder why everybody got food poisoning. And I was started thinking, what did they serve the day before? The first thing I thought about was pineapple, right? So at this point, I didn't know that much about inflammation. I was only focused on collagen and oxalates. And so I didn't know that part of the inflammation cycle was this fibrin. So I said, maybe it was the pineapple. And then an angel said to me something, I don't know what it was, said, pineapple contains bromelain. I was like, wait, why do I know that? Where did that come from? Right. And I'm like, what is bromelain? So I Google it real quick. Bromelain is used as a commercial meat tenderizer to get rid of fibrosis in farm animals. And I like had a tear come out of my eye. And I was like, well, fibromyalgia, fibrosis, it's kind of all connected. And then I went home, bought some pineapple powder as a supplement. It's actually in my supplement. I bought some pineapple powder, started taking it, and started feeling more releases happening because those enzymes in the pineapple powder mimic what your natural enzymes do. So they're going around the body looking for this misfolded proteins, cleaving the chemical bond, and then that allows your body to start removing them from the system. A funny thing is, about 2 weeks into taking this pineapple powder, it was during COVID. The kind of toward the end of COVID, I had missed 2 dentist appointments because of COVID, and I don't have any cavities, right? And so I had a big piece of plaque come out of my teeth. I was like, oh my God, that's so gross. And so I went to the dentist and she's like, oh yeah, you've got all this plaque buildup. We're going to have to do a deep clean. It's going to cost you $1,000. I was
Right.
like, oh my God, it's 3 days before Christmas. Like, what I don't want to spend $1,000 on my teeth. But my father has a bunch of false teeth because he had just weak teeth his whole life. And I was like, well, I don't want to lose my teeth. And I said to the head dentist, I said, isn't there something you can do to make it less painful for me? And I can come back in a couple of days, like spray some solvent on my teeth or something. And she goes, no, there's nothing we can do. But I remember a dentist did this for me before when I got a cleaning. And so I was like, all right, send your tech in. The tech comes in and I'm like, okay. I tell everybody that they should be an advocate for their own health. Don't make decisions on the fly about your health. And here I am doing it. And I felt like a fraud. And I said, hold on a second. So I Google proteolytic enzymes, NIH, National Institute of Health, dental plaque. Like 30 studies came up, right? So, and it was all on how the proteolytic enzymes help break down the plaque in the mouth to get rid of that plaque buildup. So I said, you know what, just give me the regular cleaning, and I left, and I was fine. And it just was like, wow, that's really interesting. Like how important enzymes are just in general for the body. They're scavengers for your body.
Huh. Well, you've had quite a life, and so it's kind of fascinating. It's like a lot of in some ways it's like very casual. In a lot of ways, what I see is a lot of hard work. Um, whether it was in athletics or around your body, a lot of study. Um, is that something that you think you natively had, or was that something that you had to develop as kind of in the face of some adversity, or was it your physical training that allowed you to kind of be well positioned to kind of go deep here? Or I think a lot of
Yeah.
people kind of are at that moment like you were 10 years ago and they come to different outcomes around where they're at 10 years later than the ones you're at.
Yeah, as bad as my stepfathers were, um, I think it caused me to be self-reliant, right? Everything that like an abandoned puppy. Nobody was raising me. I never sat at the table and did homework. No, it was just like I guess got to figure life out on my own. So I've kind of always been like that. But, I went from 1 year of high school football to 4 contracts in the NFL, 2 with each team. I started an energy brokerage without any experience in the energy markets and turned it into one of the top 100 fastest growing companies in Philadelphia 2 years in a row. Um, yeah, I just think that everything is possible. If someone can do it, I can do it. Has always been my motto. It's just had to figure it out. Fortunately, the internet's around. And fortunately, God is around. To guide me. Without those two things, I'd still be sitting here just waiting for death to take me. Like literally, I mean, I didn't want to be around anymore. And if it wasn't for my first son, who, I don't know, how much of this pain, because it's constant every single moment of your life, and it's constant and it's everywhere, and it limits your ability to be nice and to be social and to have ambition and to excel in anything that you want to do. And it's like putting a tiger in a straitjacket. Like I still had the want to be
Right.
this person, but my body just wouldn't allow it to happen. And yeah, there was no other choice, I guess.
All right. It's quite the flip.
Yeah, yeah.
Quite the flip. I love it. Speaking of, as we're kind of closing out here, we do have a signature segment of the show called the Flip Story Recipe Book. And we invite our guests to share something of the ingredients, a method, an outcome, something that others could take if they are looking to either flip their own story or even to flip a
Yeah.
moment. However you want to play it here, Dan, but
I
we'd love to get your contribution.
I've got a great one, and this is in my method called the undo method. I mean, there's a lot of really good things in there. I mean, I could give you a bunch of them, but I'll give you this one because I think this is probably the most impactful. So inflammation, right? We talked about it being a cycle, and it ends when your body releases those enzymes and eats up that fibrin, and then that everything about the inflammation should go away. the first stage of inflammation is the cell wall, right? Everything is made up of cells, right? So the first stage of inflammation is the cell wall. And your cell must be comprised of a lipid layer, of a lipid membrane of omega 3 and omega 6 at a 1-to-1 ratio. The omega 6 is pro inflammatory, right? The average American, instead of being 1-to-1, the average American is 15-to-1 of the pro-inflammatory omega-6s. And this is coming from our manufactured foods, our seed oils, our restaurant foods, etc. So if you want to slow down inflammation and get it under control, you have to first look at how are you feeding that cell. Are you giving it enough omega 3s, which is you're going to get from your eggs, your fatty fish, supplementation? The great thing is that your cell will naturally displace the omega 6 if the omega 3 is present. So just starting with a good fish oil or omega 3 supplement would be a really great way to get that inflammation fire under control. Another good thing is get rid of folic acid from the diet as much as possible as well. But yeah,
Love
the
it.
cell wall. Yeah.
I'm gonna pick up some omega-3.
Yeah.
Inspired
Yeah.
me.
Thank you. Good. You
Dan,
got to
this is
follow up with me.
I've since January 1, I've lost 15 pounds. So
Oh,
I'm
wow.
definitely pushing in that kind of like, uh-oh, I better get in front of this train. Otherwise,
What have you
it's
been doing?
I've been doing a diet. I've been doing not quite keto, but kind of like a modified keto, getting rid of a lot of the grains. I was just
Yeah.
looking at one of the drawers in our house, and I'm like, "Ah, that one's gone. I missed that drawer, but I
Yeah.
no longer get to
Yeah.
touch that one."
I,
Um,
I look at these foods like a cheating girlfriend, it's like eventually you're like, okay, I'm finished with you. Like as ice cream is that for me, right?
right,
I mean, I love ice cream but there's so much sugar in it that I can't function the next day. And I'm not going to eat just a little bit of ice cream. I'm eating the whole pint,
right.
it's just, it's
Well, you
goner
have
as
some
soon
ice
as it
cream in
hits
your
the,
history, so that would
yeah,
make
right.
sense. You
Exactly. Yeah.
go with what you
So,
know.
yep. Yep.
Yeah, and been doing the bike and things like that, um, but mainly diet, just eating less and eating a little bit better. But
Yeah.
anyway,
Yeah.
it's been awesome.
Well,
So I
if
will
you
let you
want,
know how it's going.
yeah, if you want, you can sign up on my where my playbook is hosted. It's a free community. On there, I have what's called the world's greatest shopping list, so you can actually see. And I'm going to give you, kind of a little hint. Liver is king. Like liver is the best food that you can ever put into your body. So it's got so much nutrition in it that's bioavailable. But other than that, there's not a lot of gross foods on there. But
Right. All right.
yeah.
So that kind of gets us to, a massive thank you. But before we wrap out, how do people find you? So go ahead.
Yeah. So my
What do you got?
website is www.undu.me. So undo me. And I say UNDU with a U because there's a lot of Eastern philosophies in there, like grounding, like meditation, deep breathing, things like that. Or, yeah, I mean, that's the best place. And you can find my supplement there. And if anybody uses the code FLEX, they'll get a discount on the supplement. And then there's also a link that'll take you to where my community is. And that's where I host the chronic pain playbook. Which I mean, it's $13.96 for the month. You can get through it in a week easily. I wanted to make it very accessible to everybody, so it's
Right.
very easy to digest as well. I'm actually just got done shooting version 2 of it, so both version 1 and version 2 will be up there if anybody wants to go back to version 1. But version 2, I realized sometimes I go off on tangents, and I needed to stick to the script, so I stuck to the script a little bit more, made it a little bit easier to digest. And I know it sounds overwhelming to a lot of people because these are terms that they haven't heard before. But once again, it's really 5 major pain makers. And I give you where they come from, how you break them down, or how you help the body break them down, and the foods that you can get them in, or any supplements that you can utilize to help the body create that process. So even if you just skim through it and bought the supplements that are listed there, the food items, you're going to end up in a better place.
Amazing. I will put both those links in the notes on the show.
Thank you.
So, and thank you for sharing the discount too.
David, yeah, thank you so much. I really, really appreciate your
This has been
style.
fun.
Yeah, it's great. This has been one of the greatest podcasts. You're very curious, and I really appreciate that.
Oh wow, thank you.
Yeah.
This has been it's been a lot of fun. Your story's pretty awesome, so it's easy to kind of get there. So, but honestly, thank you for that. That's
Thank you so much. Yeah.
flattering. All right, folks. So we're going to close it out here with Dan Esposito. This was a pretty wonderful story here on the Flip Story, and we'll see you on the next one. All right, bye everyone.